I didn't walk into that ballroom expecting applause, but I never imagined I'd be branded a housekeeper at my own sister-in-law's luxury engagement. The tag was slapped onto my chest like a scarlet letter, the sharp pin biting into my skin. Gasps and chuckles rippled across the glittering hall. Guests in sequined gowns and tailored tuxedos turned to watch. Champagne glasses paused midair, diamonds and cufflinks flashing beneath chandeliers. My husband smirked, his lips curling with cruel amusement. My mother-in-law, Margaret, raised her crystal glass high, her pearls trembling with satisfaction. They thought they'd humiliate me into silence. They thought I'd swallow it, like I always had, like a dutiful wife, like a voiceless shadow. But what they didn't know was that the woman they mocked that night would walk away. Not broken, but burning, ready to turn the tables on every last one of them. Before we dive into this dramatic tale, don't forget to subscribe to Her Betrayal Stories and ring the notification bell. Here, you'll always find stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and the most unexpected turnarounds. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below. Who knows? Maybe the next story will remind you of your own. I'm Claire, 51, a woman who once believed marriage was built on partnership, respect, and love. A woman who ironed shirts in the dim light of dawn, cooked meals that kept a household alive, and stayed awake into the cold hours of night, crunching numbers to rescue her husband's family company from collapse. Yes, I saved them. I held the Hawthorne legacy together with sleepless nights and sheer willpower. But they rewrote history without my name. His mother, Margaret, never hid her contempt. Her cold blue eyes could slice through silk. I remember overhearing her once at a garden luncheon, the clink of silver spoons against china teacups punctuating her disdain. "Ethan could have done better," she whispered, believing I was out of earshot. A woman with pedigree, connections. To her, I was nothing more than a placeholder, a convenience, someone to polish her son's shine, but never shine on my own. Even Olivia, once like a little sister to me, had changed. I remember her as a teenager perched on my counter, hair in a messy bun, giggling as we stirred pasta sauce in my kitchen. She called me her second mom. But Margaret's poison dripped steady over the years, seeping into her veins like wine into white linen. By the time Ryan entered her life, Olivia's laughter had hardened into cold smiles. To her, I was no longer family. I was disposable. And then came the night of the engagement party. The ballroom was a world of glitter and glass. Waiters in white gloves glided through the crowd, silver trays balanced like halos. The air was heavy with perfume, roses, jasmine, something expensive and sharp. Violins swelled from the corner orchestra, notes trembling beneath vaulted ceilings. At the check-in table, my name sat neatly under Hawthorne family. For a fleeting second, I felt included. But Margaret's manicured hand swooped in, plucking the card like a hawk snatching prey. Her painted lips curved into a smirk as she replaced it with another. She leaned forward, close enough for me to smell her champagne breath, and pinned it to my dress with deliberate cruelty. Housekeeper. The letters stared back in bold black ink. "A fitting title, wouldn't you say?" she murmured, her voice dripping venom. "After all, you've been keeping Ethan's house for years." The room erupted. Laughter. Snickers. The orchestra faltered for a note before resuming. Faces turned, some pitying, most amused. My skin prickled under the heat of 100 eyes. And Ethan, my husband, the man I had once trusted, only shrugged with mock exasperation. "She insists on being part of the family," he announced, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Let her enjoy the night." My years of sacrifice reduced to a punchline. But humiliation does something. It strips you bare. It jolts you awake. I stood there, the tag searing against my chest, my palms damp with sweat. My eyes swept the glittering room, chandeliers dripping light like molten diamonds, waiters weaving through laughter, champagne spilling over the rims of fragile flutes. And in that haze of cruelty, one thought rooted itself inside me. If they saw me as nothing, then what did I have to lose? Because while Ethan laughed, while Margaret gloated, while Olivia basked in the glow of her diamond ring, I was already preparing, quietly, patiently. Every slight, every whisper, every betrayal was no longer just pain, it was fuel. And they had no idea the woman they mocked as a housekeeper held the one thing that could bring them all to their knees. For now, let me ask you, if you were me, standing in that ballroom, branded a housekeeper in front of family and strangers alike, what would you have done? Would you stay silent? Swallow the shame? Pretend it didn't matter? Or would you fight back? I chose the latter. And oh, how sweet the reckoning would be. Humiliation doesn't rinse off in the shower. It lingers under your skin like smoke in your lungs. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the gold letters of that tag, housekeeper, burning against my dress at Olivia's engagement. Ethan acted as if it had been harmless fun. "You're too sensitive, Claire," he muttered over breakfast, scrolling his phone. "Mom was just joking. Everyone laughed. Can't you take a joke?" A joke. That was what my years of loyalty had become to him. I wanted to smash my coffee cup against the marble counter, to scream that my dignity wasn't a punchline. Instead, I swallowed the anger for the moment. But the disrespect didn't stop. 2 weeks later, Ethan came home with a folder of forgotten papers. The Hawthorne Manufacturing logo stared back at me like an old ghost. One glance and my blood ran cold. Amendments to the ownership structure. My name, the woman who had saved the company, was nowhere to be found. "Don't bother with these details," Ethan said, sliding the documents out of reach. "It's family business." Family business. The words cut deeper than any blade. Wasn't I family? Or was I merely the housekeeper they paraded when convenient? Erased when not? I pressed my lips together, my fingers trembling under the table. They were already moving the chess pieces, and I wasn't even on the board. Olivia stopped calling. When I offered to help with her wedding, she brushed me off. "Ryan's family has better taste," she said coldly. "You wouldn't understand the kind of elegance we're going for." It wasn't just rejection, it was erasure. Margaret began hosting dinner parties without even pretending to include me. When I overheard and asked, Ethan would shrug. "Oh, it was just a small gathering. You wouldn't have fit in." I had once been the backbone of this family. Now I was a ghost, haunting my own marriage. One evening, crossing the hall, I caught voices from Ethan's office, low, conspiratorial. I froze by the door. "Claire's becoming a liability," Margaret whispered. "She's weak," Ethan replied. "She won't do anything. She never does." My stomach twisted. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. They weren't just ignoring me. They were plotting against me. "She still believes she's part of this family," Margaret sneered. "That's the amusing part. But once Olivia marries Ryan, we won't need her anymore. We'll make sure she's managed. Managed. Like a problem to be solved. If you've ever overheard people you love discussing you as if you were disposable, you know the feeling. Your chest hollowing out, your knees threatening to buckle. I retreated quietly that night, tears burning my eyes. For years, I had told myself patience was strength. But the truth had become undeniable. Patience had only made me invisible. The insults grew bolder. At another family gathering, Margaret raised her glass with theatrical grandeur. To Ethan, who has carried this company on his shoulders, and to Olivia, who will soon bring real pedigree into this family, we've been blessed. Her gaze flicked to me, sharp as a blade. And thank you, Claire, for keeping the house tidy. Laughter erupted. I forced a smile, my nails carving crescents into my palms under the table. Ethan leaned back, adding salt to the wound. She does love cleaning up after me. Don't you, Claire? Every eye in the room was on me, waiting for a reaction. I excused myself, walked into the hallway, and stood there trembling. This isn't love, I whispered to myself. This is ownership. Control. For a heartbeat, I saw myself from above, as if watching a film scene. A woman in a simple dress, shoulders squared but eyes wet, standing under a glittering chandelier that belonged to people who despised her. The final straw was Madison. I had suspected Ethan's infidelity before, but suspicion hardened into certainty the night I smelled Chanel No. 5 on his jacket. It wasn't mine. Later, I found the hotel receipts tucked into his briefcase. Madison, a young executive assistant. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He laughed. You're past your prime, Claire. Madison makes me feel alive. Don't be dramatic. Alive. As if my decades of sacrifice had been a coffin around his neck. Besides, he added coldly, no one would believe you. Not against me. You're just useless now. Useless. The word echoed in my ears like a judge's gavel slamming down. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, the harsh light carving lines into my reflection. Years of work etched across my face, eyes dulled from swallowing pain. Was this who I had become? I thought of every meal I'd cooked, every business call I'd handled, every night I'd stayed awake worrying about payroll while Ethan slept soundly. I thought of Olivia's laughter in my kitchen years ago, of Margaret's pearls rattling in her fury. And I thought of the name tag, Housekeeper. For the first time, I did not cry. I smiled. A small, cold smile. Because if Ethan and Margaret believed I was powerless, they had underestimated me. If you've ever been called useless, let me tell you, you are not. The ones who throw those words are terrified of your strength, and my strength was about to surface. They didn't know it yet, but I had been quietly gathering pieces of truth. Documents, conversations, connections. The housekeeper they mocked was preparing to burn down their illusion of power. The reckoning was coming. If you were standing where I stood, erased from your own family, branded useless, would you keep enduring, or would you fight back? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the loudest truth. When Ethan called me useless, something inside me snapped. Not in rage, but in clarity. I realized he had revealed more about himself in that moment than he intended. He thought I was powerless, invisible, predictable, and that belief was going to be his undoing. For months, quietly, I had been gathering breadcrumbs. At first, it was instinct. An email I didn't delete. A financial statement I copied before Ethan could shred it. Notes from board meetings where Margaret dismissed my presence. Little fragments, tucked away in a folder labeled Housekeeping. How fitting. Inside that folder was a trail of embezzlement, $3.2 million funneled into shell accounts, some under Madison's name. I had voice recordings too. Ethan boasting to his golf buddies, Margaret whispering about managing Claire out of the picture. Proof, not speculation. And though I was never meant to sit at the head of the table, I had learned the business inside out. Numbers don't lie. People do. The first step in reclaiming my power was silence. At dinners, I smiled faintly while Ethan gloated. When Margaret raised her glass, I toasted with her. I even complimented Olivia on her wedding plans, pretending to be the obedient, overlooked housekeeper. But behind closed doors, I was making calls to lawyers, to old colleagues who respected me more than they respected Ethan, to one particular journalist I trusted, a woman who had once told me, "The truth always finds its way out. Sometimes it just needs a little push." The most dangerous moment came one afternoon when Ethan almost discovered the folder. He barged into my study unannounced. "What are you working on?" he asked, suspicion narrowing his eyes. "Recipes," I lied, tilting the screen so he saw a half-written shopping list. "Thinking about Olivia's rehearsal dinner." He laughed, dismissing me. "Stick to what you know best, Claire." And I thought, I am. It wasn't just about evidence. It was about reclaiming my sense of self. I began journaling again, not about them, but about me. Who I had been before Ethan, before Margaret. A girl who dreamed of building something meaningful, who believed in fairness, who once stood on her own 2 feet without apology. Slowly, I felt that girl stirring back to life. The turning point, though, wasn't only internal. It came with a single phone call. "Claire?" It was Olivia, her voice trembling. I don't know who else to call." For a moment, I didn't recognize her tone. This wasn't the icy, distant Olivia who had dismissed me weeks ago. This was the young woman who used to laugh in my kitchen. "What's wrong?" I asked cautiously. "It's Ryan," she whispered. "He's not who he says he is. There are things I found. Bank statements. Fake investors. Claire, I think he's using me." Silence filled the line. My heart ached for her, but also, here was the seed of something larger. "Come to me," I said gently. "Bring everything you have." That night, Olivia sat at my kitchen table again, just like years ago. She spread out documents, trembling. I spread out mine, and for the first time, she looked at me not as a housekeeper, not as an outsider, but as an ally. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked. "Because sometimes," I told her, "you have to let people reveal their true colors before you show yours." Together, we began piecing things together. Ethan's fraud, Ryan's deceit, Margaret's manipulations. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a web. And I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Olivia, once Margaret's pawn, was now my unexpected partner. But secrecy was everything. If Ethan or Margaret even suspected, the plan would crumble. So we staged normalcy. I cooked dinner. Olivia attended fittings. Ethan strutted through boardrooms. Margaret hosted luncheons. And all the while, beneath the surface, the tide was shifting. The moment that solidified my resolve came when Ethan confronted me again, this time with venom. "I know you're unhappy," he said, cornering me in the study. "But let's be clear, you're nothing without this family. Don't get any foolish ideas. If you try to leave me, you'll walk away with nothing. Not a penny. Not even your dignity." I looked him straight in the eye for the first time in years. "Then maybe," I said calmly, "I don't need this family anymore." For a split second, something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe even fear. He wasn't used to me talking back. And I knew then. The balance was shifting. Have you ever had that moment? The one where you realize the person holding power over you no longer scares you? It's liberating. Terrifying too, but liberating. That was my moment. The next phase wasn't rage, it was strategy. I arranged meetings with lawyers, careful to schedule them during Ethan's business trips with Madison. I made copies of every crucial document, storing them in 3 separate places. And I asked Olivia to quietly reach out to Ryan's former colleagues, who were more than willing to talk once they realized someone was listening. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Ethan thought he was untouchable. Margaret believed her pearls and pedigree were shields. Ryan assumed his charm could mask his fraud. But the truth was gathering momentum, and soon it would crash down on all of them. The night before Olivia's rehearsal dinner, I stood in my bedroom staring at my reflection. No pearls, no diamonds, just a simple black dress. The kind of armor I could move in. I opened the housekeeping folder one last time, my fingers brushing over the papers. Then I slid them into a leather case. When I zipped it shut, it felt like sealing a coffin, but not mine. At the rehearsal dinner, as glasses clinked and laughter echoed, Margaret raised her voice above the crowd. "To family," she declared, smiling thinly at me, "even those who barely belong." I smiled back, calm and steady, because for once I wasn't rattled. I wasn't the one on trial anymore. They were. And the storm I had been preparing was about to break. The night of Olivia's wedding rehearsal was thick with perfume, champagne, and the sound of polished laughter. The Hawthorne name sparkled on the gilded banners as though it had never been dragged through debt and near bankruptcy. Guests clinked glasses, cameras flashed, and Margaret glided across the ballroom in pearls, the queen of a crumbling empire she thought was untouchable. I sat at the edge of the long table, invisible again, or so they thought. The leather case rested quietly by my chair, like a loaded weapon no one could see. The dinner dragged on until Margaret decided to put on her performance. She stood, glass in hand. "To my son Ethan," she began, her voice dripping with pride, "a man of honor, who carries our family legacy. To Olivia, who brings us hope. And to Ryan, soon to be one of us." She paused, eyes settling on me with mock sweetness. "And to Claire, our ever-faithful housekeeper." Laughter rippled through the room, cruel and knowing. Ethan smirked. Ryan winked at Olivia. I pushed back my chair. The scrape of wood on marble silenced the room. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my wedding ring on the table. The click echoed like a gavel. "Then I'm no longer yours," I said, my voice steady, each word slicing through the air. Gasps erupted. Ethan's smirk faltered. Margaret stiffened. Olivia's eyes widened. "Claire, sit down," Ethan hissed. "Don't embarrass yourself." "Embarrass myself?" I laughed softly. "No, Ethan. Tonight I'm done being embarrassed for you." I opened the leather case and pulled out the folder labeled Housekeeping. The guests leaned forward, curious. Margaret's pearl necklace trembled against her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, turning to the room, "you deserve to know the truth about the man you've been praising." I held up the first set of documents. $3.2 million, stolen, redirected into accounts under Madison Carter's name. Gasps again, sharper this time. Heads turned toward Ethan. "That's a lie!" Ethan barked, but his voice cracked. I pressed a button on my phone. The speakers crackled to life with Ethan's recorded voice. "She's weak. She won't do anything. She never does." The room froze. Margaret's hand shot out, trying to grab the phone, but I pulled it back. "Oh, I'm not finished," I said calmly. Next came Ryan's downfall. Olivia stood beside me now, her hands trembling but her voice strong. "And this," she said, spreading Ryan's fake bank statements across the table, "is the man I was supposed to marry. Fraud. Lies. Every dollar he claimed to have was stolen." Ryan's face drained of color. "Olivia, don't," she snapped. "Don't you dare speak to me." The guests erupted in whispers. Phones were out, snapping photos, recording videos. The humiliation that had once been mine was now theirs, multiplied and magnified. Ethan lunged toward me, his face twisted in fury. "You think anyone will believe you? You're nothing without me." I met his rage with calm steel. "This villa? This company? This family name you parade? None of it is yours. It's mine, and you're trespassing." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, because in my hand I held the deed, the one Ethan and Margaret had tried to erase me from, but hadn't. My lawyers had made sure of that. "This house belongs to me," I declared, "and as of this moment, so does your downfall." The room exploded in chaos. Guests shouted. Margaret tried to shout over them, insisting it was a setup, but no one was listening to her anymore. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced down, and his face turned ashen. The SEC had been notified. The fraud investigation was already underway. A reporter I had tipped off slipped through the crowd, camera flashing. Ethan shoved the table, knocking over glasses, his composure shattering. He grabbed his laptop bag, yanked it open, and when the SEC email appeared on screen, he hurled the laptop across the room. It hit the mirrored wall with a crash, fragments scattering. Gasps turned into shrieks. Someone caught it on video. Within hours, the internet would christen it Shah Hawthorne Meltdown. Margaret tried one last time to regain control. She grabbed my wrist, nails digging into my skin. "You ungrateful woman," she spat. "We gave you everything." I pulled free, raising my voice so the entire room could hear. "No, Margaret. I gave you everything, and you repaid me with humiliation, with betrayal. But tonight, the debt is settled." For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not anger, not disdain. Fear. And it was glorious. The guests began to leave in a storm of murmurs and pitying glances. Olivia stood beside me, strong now, her hand squeezing mine. Ryan slinked out the back, his empire of lies collapsing. Ethan paced, sweating, muttering curses while Margaret sat rigid, her pearls suddenly cheap plastic in the harsh light. And me? I stood taller than I had in years, because in that moment the balance had shifted. The housekeeper they mocked had become the judge, the witness, and the executioner. Not with violence, but with truth. Later that night, as I stepped outside, the cool air hit my face. Reporters crowded the gate. Cameras flashed. Microphones pushed forward. "Claire, how long did you know?" "Claire, are you divorcing Ethan?" "Claire, do you own the Hawthorne estate now?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I simply looked back at the house they once told me I didn't belong in, and whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning." Tell me, if you were in my place, standing with all the proof in your hand, would you have exposed them in front of everyone? Or would you have waited, striking in silence? I chose the public reckoning, and it was delicious. A week after the rehearsal dinner, the Hawthorne estate was quiet for the first time in years. No clinking glasses, no orchestras, no laughter echoing from rooms where I'd once been made invisible. The silence was almost eerie, but also strangely comforting. The headlines had done their work. Hawthorne heir exposed in $3.2 million scandal. Hawthorne meltdown goes viral. CEO caught destroying laptop during SEC raid. From housekeeper to heiress, the untold story of Claire. The world finally knew what I had always known, that Ethan's empire was built on lies, Margaret's pride was hollow, and Ryan's charm was a mask for fraud. And me? I was no longer the housekeeper. I was free. Ethan tried calling me, of course. The first voicemail was furious, his voice ragged with rage. "You ruined me, Claire. Do you understand? You'll regret this." The second was desperate. "Please, we can fix this. I'll make it right. I'll come home." The third was barely a whisper, almost childlike. "Don't leave me alone, Claire. I don't know who I am without you." I never called back. My lawyer advised me not to, but even without his advice, I wouldn't have. Some doors, once closed, must never reopen. Some cages, once escaped, must never be re-entered. At night, I sometimes thought about those voicemails. Not with longing, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Each one was a mirror reflecting a different Ethan, the tyrant, the manipulator, the lost boy. And none of them were a man I wanted beside me anymore. Margaret disappeared from the social scene. Rumor had it she was working as a receptionist at a dental office, her pearls traded for scrubs, her sharp tongue now answering phones. I didn't hate her. Pity, maybe, because in the end, her obsession with appearances had left her without a family to parade. The grand lady of society reduced to waiting rooms and calendars. Ryan fled to another city. No glossy Instagram posts, no expensive suits, just a shadow slipping out of the story he had tried to hijack. Olivia, stronger now, cut off all ties. A month later, she sent me a text. "Thank you for everything. I wouldn't have survived without you." I smiled when I read it. For the first time, she had seen me not as an outsider, but as family. And maybe that was the quietest, sweetest victory of all. 1 year later, I stood in the grand hall of Crystal Gardens, the very ballroom where I had once been branded housekeeper. But tonight, it wasn't an engagement party. It was something else entirely. "Welcome," I said to the crowd before me, my voice steady, carried by the chandeliers, "to the first annual community dinner for families in transition." The chandeliers sparkled above tables filled with immigrants celebrating new citizenship, single mothers launching small businesses, young students receiving scholarships. The air hummed not with arrogance, but with hope. This was no longer a place of humiliation, it was a place of renewal. And in the corner of the hall, behind glass, I had framed the name tag, Housekeeper, not as a wound, as a reminder. A symbol that the title they used to diminish me had become the source of my power. During dinner, a woman approached me. She was a guest from that night long ago when Margaret had humiliated me. "I still remember," she said softly, her eyes glistening. "The look on your face, the cruelty in theirs. And now," she gestured around the room, voice breaking, "now you are the one who built something lasting. You are the true Hawthorne legacy." Her words lodged deep in my chest, not as pain, but as healing. Because in that moment, I knew. Victory wasn't just about taking something from them. It was about giving something back to myself and to others who had been silenced, humiliated, overlooked. I shook her hand, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless. As the night wound down, I stood near the glass case, staring at the word housekeeper. For years, I had believed sacrifice meant silence, that to love was to endure, that to be family was to erase myself. But I had been wrong. Respect isn't given by blood. It isn't claimed by pearls or by last names. Respect is earned through love, kindness, and the courage to stand tall when others want to make you small. Sometimes people still ask me if I regret it all. The years I lost, the humiliation, the betrayal. And my answer is simple. No. Because every scar, every insult, every whispered useless carved me into the woman I am now. Revenge was never about watching them fall. It was about reclaiming myself, building something stronger, proving that even when they tried to reduce me to nothing, I was already more than they could handle. So, if you're watching this, and you've ever been humiliated, dismissed, called useless or nothing, remember this: you are not powerless. The very things they mock you for may become your strength. Because revenge, in its truest form, isn't about destruction, it's about transformation. It's about taking what was meant to break you and turning it into the foundation of your power. Now I want to ask you, if you had been in my shoes, humiliated in front of a ballroom full of people, would you have fought back? Would you have exposed them publicly or chosen silence? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because here, in this community, no one suffers alone. Every story we tell is a reminder: injustice does not get the last word. If this story touched you, leave a message for yourself in the comments, a promise that you will never let anyone erase your worth. And don't forget to subscribe to her Betrayal stories for more tales of sacrifice, betrayal, and the powerful turnarounds that remind us all: justice may take time, but it always arrives.